Welcome to Legal AF with Court Accountability Action. I'm Mike Sachs, and I'm joined today by Cristian Farias. He is a legal journalist, writes for The New Yorker, Vanity Fair, New York Magazine. And Cristian, you were at an event just last week with Justice Amy Coney Barrett in New York City being interviewed about her new book. And you had some observations there that I think are very much worth talking about. So how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Mike forgot to say that we're also friends. So,
well, we're all friends here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she had some interesting observations. Of course, she is on a tour for a book launch that she just finished and put out into the world today, I believe. The name is Listening to the Law. And she's joining the ranks of other Supreme Court justices with big books out, among them, Justice Sotomayor, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and of course, Clarence Thomas. The only difference is that her book is not so much about her life story, although she sprinkles a little bit about her personal life in it, but it's more about where she is now, how the court decides cases, and that kind of thing. And at this event, where she was at with Barry Weiss, the founder and editor of the Free Press, which you may or may not be familiar with, she said that, quote, "We're not in a constitutional crisis at this moment." She does not know what a constitutional crisis would look like. In other words, things are fine, and let the Supreme Court do what it's doing, and just trust us, we'll be okay.
And what is the Supreme Court doing right now, and how should we be trusting them with what they're doing?
Well, as you may be familiar, just yesterday, the Supreme Court issued an order in its so-called shadow docket without any reasoning nor an explanation for its actions, basically greenlighting widespread Fourth Amendment violations against people.
People, Cristian, mind you.
Yeah, notice I'm not saying what they look like or where they're from. They're really workers. There are people who are working for a modest day pay, sometimes low-wage workers. Yes, many of them are immigrant, but the ruling's implications, which I'll get to in a minute, is that under it, you can be ensnared, even if you're a citizen, even if have been here for a long time. You may work with your own family at a home business or family business together, whether it be a car wash or a garment factory. You could be farm workers working together, father and son, as it often happens in these kinds of workplaces. And this ruling greenlights widespread Fourth Amendment violations because now ICE agents conducting sweeps do not need reasonable suspicion. They do not need to have articulable facts, as the Supreme Court likes to say, in order to conduct these sweeps. All they need is, do you look a certain way? Do you speak a certain language? Do you have an accent? Do you engage in certain kinds of jobs or do certain kinds of work? Are you a day laborer, meaning a person who solicits work out at a Home Depot or a 7-Eleven, which is very common in many immigrant rich communities, and they can just grab you and ask questions later. And later could be days, if at all. It could take much longer before you even see the outside again, because when you're in immigration proceedings, it's its own kind of separate no man's land where laws kind of seem to be suspended many times.
So, Cristian, let's break down who exactly is targeted in this, because we both read the lower court opinions in this case. We both saw what the district court in California and the Ninth Circuit each said, blocking this new Trump order and instruction towards ICE to pretty much round people up, ask questions later, and and require people to bring their papers wherever they go. In Sotomayor's dissent from this case, Noem versus Vasquez Perdomo, she writes, "We should not have to live in a country where the government can seize anyone who looks Latino, speaks Spanish, and appears to work a low-wage job. Rather than stand idly by while our constitutional freedoms are lost, I dissent." So at least according to Sotomayor in her dissent on behalf of herself and Justices Kagan and Jackson, this particular policy seems specifically aimed at Latinos. Is that a fair way to characterize this opinion, which did seem to also constitutionalize racial profiling?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you remember, this all stems from what we all saw with our own eyes in June, where when ICE and the National Guard, which the president nationalized, the California National Guard, descended upon Los Angeles and the greater LA area, and they've been conducting all these sweeps, and the sweeps aren't, discreet. They are loud. They're very visible. They are basically out there grabbing people off the streets. We've seen videos that have gone viral. We've seen the mobilizations by both the community and the protesters, and yeah, it's basically Stephen Miller's pipe dream of grabbing people by the thousands in order to then put them in immigration proceedings. And now the Supreme Court, by blessing these tactics, now that opens the door to other cities where this can happen also. And the president has announced already that he wants to do similar things in in New York City, and Chicago, New Orleans, and I hope it's not the last word, and I hope these other localities and groups people who live in these places can challenge this, because it cannot be the law that this has to be allowed to happen without any check or restraint.
Right. Yeah. And yet it's also not even the law, though it is, but it's not, because this was put on the Supreme Court's shadow docket, in which they let Trump proceed with this operation at large, they're calling it, while appeals play out on the throughout the rest of the processes for this case. This all came up from like a temporary restraining order, So if the court is not explaining what it does, and it leaves it up to Justice Brett Kavanaugh in this case to write a multi-page apologia for the court's otherwise unexplained order on the shadow docket, then are we even living in a lawful or lawless society, or are we just in this vacuum that the Supreme Court has been keeping us in by having, 18 now straight cases in which it's laid down for Trump without even making any decision on the merits?
Yeah, and what's worse is that now future judges, whether in New York or in California or other places where they might rule on similar issues, because we have no law, we don't have a ruling on the merits, we don't have the reasoning of the court explaining how it reached its decision. Now judges in other places are going to have to wonder, how do we decide similar fact patterns? We have very specific populations that are very much immigrant, who just kind of people live and breathe and work and have families, and they conduct their daily lives. As if you go to Queens or if you go to certain sections of New Jersey, it's like being an immigrant is not even something that people have questions about. You just live with everyone together, and that's what makes some of these cities so great. But how are judges now supposed to decide these cases without guidance from the court? And by the way, should a court rule the other way or rule against the administration once again, we may have people like Justice Gorsuch or Kavanaugh himself complaining, why aren't these lower courts obeying our decisions or following our orders? What is all this defiance?
Yeah.
There's nothing for them to go on. So they have to kind of work with the best that they have. And right now, is not the law what the Supreme Court just did in the shadow docket. The law is you have no right to go after anyone without reasonable suspicion. And just because of the color of their skin, or because they happen to work at a car wash or seek work outside of a Home Depot, that is not reasonable suspicion. That's plain racial discrimination, ethnic discrimination. And that cannot be the law of the land.
Yeah, it's not individualized. It's nothing. It's just You're part of a group that fits some type of stereotype we're looking for, and we're going to go and take your real ID and say this might be fake, even though you're a citizen, and make you wait for however long in terror that you might be removed from your family and maybe even sent off to a third country simply because of an arbitrary understanding of an ICE agent in a mask rolling by your street through your city. And it's just gross.
I'm started kind of wondering too, I have hired day laborers to work on my backyard, and I imagine if I ever had to kind of go in a van to pick one of them up, and me looking the way I do, and all of a sudden ICE shows up and both of us are there together, will I get swept up too, just for the mere fact that I'm around a location where these folks congregate and look for work? I mean, no one is safe. And that's something that I hope people take away from this. And I'm actually kind of glad that there has been a backlash to this decision in ways that we haven't seen to other shadow docket decisions, because it creates conscience that what is happening is not sustainable, is unconscionable, and is just deeply, deeply undemocratic. Because in a court system, the judges are not elected, and for them to be issuing decisions without even bothering to explain themselves, it just goes against just basic norms and basic checks and balances about how the system should work.
Yeah. And yet they probably think that, as you mentioned, the lower court judges are the rogue ones, the ones closest to the facts, closest to the people, closest to the situation at hand, the ones that are actually going by the law as currently stated. They're the rogue ones. And it's the topsy-turvy world that Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who's among the majority in almost all of these shadow docket cases, lives in, as you saw in the speech and the talk that she gave, saying that she doesn't think we're in a constitutional crisis. The question is, when will it be for you? And I imagine her idea of a constitutional crisis is very different than the rest of ours.
Yeah, I imagine her idea of a constitutional crisis might be, I don't know, there's some blockage on the street on her way to the Supreme Court, and her car cannot move because there's protesters and she cannot get to work. I don't know. I don't know what a constitutional crisis might be for some of the justices, but indeed, it beggars belief that now we have one of the most populous districts in the whole country, in the whole federal court system, the Central District of California, where, by the way, just many people have lived there. People of Mexican descent, people who even whose families predate the Mexican-American War, for whom immigration status is not even a thing. Like, it's not something that even crosses people's minds because they're so used to living in that kind of a society. For them, now they have to carry their passport with them or other documentation because you never know. You look a certain way, you talk a certain way, you may have an accent, and now your very your very sense of self and identity are questioned by this ruling. It's truly, this is not the world that we should be living in.
No, but it seems to be the point of Stephen Miller's world he's trying to impose on the rest of us through the Trump administration.
Yep, indeed. Yeah. That is the world. And it's so far, if we let it stand, that's the world that we're going to live in for the time being.
How do we fight back?
How do we fight? I think that the immigrant rights organizations and the cities that are still haven't been targeted in the way that LA were targeted. I should note that LA wasn't a party to this case. They filed an amicus brief in the Supreme Court. LA has very much standing to challenge some of these actions. I imagine other localities do as well. And other day laborers and organizers who are very much in this fight in other parts of the country, I imagine they should and can challenge similar moves by the Trump administration. Because, again, although this ruling may apply in the Central District of California and perhaps even the Ninth Circuit, it is not the case in the Seventh Circuit. It is not the case in the Second Circuit. And these challenges should continue. These organizations and these plaintiffs should force the issue. And others who perhaps are not targeted by this, who perhaps do not fit the profile that ICE is looking for, they have to bear witness. They have to record. They have to show up whenever they see these actions happening. There are apps that are being circulated. I believe one is called ICE Block that you can download to find out whether in your own locality there is ICE roundups happening. And it's basically kind of like your iPhone tells you if there's a cop on the side of the road waiting for you, saying if there's going to be a speed check. ICE Block and other apps work the same way. They let you know when ICE may be nearby. And if you see that ICE is about to pull up in your community, hey, nothing stops you from showing up and bearing witness. Sometimes just power and numbers can make a big difference to keep ICE at bay and to protect the communities that you belong to.
Yeah. Well, Cristian, I know you have a profile coming out soon, or a review coming out soon for Vanity Fair on Justice Amy Coney Barrett's book that we alluded to at the top of this video. But, I kind of think you set up the juxtaposition quite well. Here's someone who's saying we're not in a constitutional crisis, and please read my book about, you can tell us what it's about, but I imagine there's not much in it about the current constitutional crisis we are now in. Or we can look at her silence, not what she's been writing, but what she's been silent about in the shadow docket cases that have been emerging with her assent to let Trump and his fascist forces run through our country without any judicial blockage from up high.
Indeed. I think she dedicates about 3 pages to the shadow docket in her book, and they're not very illuminating. She pretty much almost defends the practice without offering any solutions. So it looks like for the time being, she seems fine with it, but who knows? Maybe more people making noise about it will cause the court to just actually add these cases to their docket and let the arguments play out in the court of public opinion as well.
Yeah, well, that's going to happen no matter what, because they are now part of the court of public opinion. And we are the ones who are watching the courts and making sure that they don't get away with the very kinds of things that they are currently trying to get past us while we're thinking we're not watching. But we are here. We're talking about it. And everyone watching here, please keep paying attention. Subscribe to Legal AF, and thank you very much for watching. Cristian, my friend, I appreciate your being here. We'll do this again, all right?
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mike.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.